our friends over at The Hill have recently talked about this story about Ron DeSantis facing a backlash from black conservatives. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is facing a growing chorus of criticism from black conservatives over his state's new educational guidelines, which include the requirement that students be told about how black people benefited from slavery. Representative Byron Donald, also from Florida, who is black, sparked an online feud with some of DeSantis' allies after he criticized that part of the guidelines. Now, the Black Conservative Federation also condemned the policy, while Senator Tim Scott, the Republican from South Carolina, who is running against DeSantis for the GOP presidential nomination, responded by saying, "There is no silver lining in slavery." I didn't know that needed to be said. He went on, "Slavery was really about separating families, about mutilating humans, and even raping their wives. It was just devastating. The backlash poses a challenge for DeSantis and his presidential campaign, particularly in winning over black voters in a general election if he does with the GOP nomination." Now, Whitley Yates, who's the director of diversity and engagement for the Indiana Republican State Committee, told The Hill that if the only way Governor DeSantis is able to garner attention from the masses is when he enrages the black community, I don't see this as a winning strategy for his presidential campaign. I don't know. I think Republicans have used enraging the black community and at least scapegoating the black community for many years to great success. Just look up the Southern strategy from Richard Nixon. You know, his what's the man's name? Lee Atwater, his strategist, talked about how Richard Nixon used race specifically to draw white people to vote for Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan and all these other people. So I played this video a few weeks ago, but this is what he talked about. This is from 1981 when he was working in Ronald Reagan's White House about how the Republican Party scapegoated black people.
Here's how I would approach that issue as a statistician or a political scientist, or no, as a psychologist, which I'm not, is how abstract you handle the race thing. In other words, you start out, and now y'all aren't quoting me on this. You start out in 1954 by saying nigger, nigger, nigger. By 1968, you can't say nigger. That hurts you, it backfires. So you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights, and all that stuff. And you're getting so abstract now, you're talking about cutting taxes, and all of these things you're talking about are totally economic things, and the byproduct of them is blacks get hurt worse than white.
Yep.
And subconsciously, maybe that is part of it. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that if it is getting that abstract and that coded, that we're doing away with the racial problem one way or the other. You follow me? Because obviously, sitting around saying we want to cut taxes, we want to cut this, and we want is much more abstract than even the busing thing, and a hell of a lot more abstract than nigger nigger.
So that's Lee Atwater talking about the Republican Southern strategy, basically how they got white people to vote for the Republican Party. He said, we can't say nigger, nigger, nigger anymore, so we started talking about busing. When we couldn't talk about busing anymore, we talked about taxes. Let's just be real. You know, antagonizing the black community is a good way to get in the favor of conservatives, especially the white ones. But anyway, Whitley Yates went on to say there are prominent Republicans, both black and white, that see and take issue with the wording of this section, and I think they are well within their rights. No one looks at other marginalized groups and genocides and attempts to pick out the silver lining in the genocide, the silver lining in the atrocity. Now, controversy surrounding Florida's education policies have been building since DeSantis signed the Stop Woke Act into law last year. I'm sorry, this is just pretty ridiculous. The legislation prohibits teachers from teaching anything that could be to make someone feel personal responsibility for historic wrongdoings because of their race, sex, or national origin. Although that legislation received backlash mainly from Democrats, the provision about people benefiting from slavery has drawn bipartisan criticisms. Now, Donald has hedged his criticism, saying that standards are overall good, robust, and accurate, but he just said that part of the guidelines that are an attempt to feature the personal benefits of slavery is wrong and needs to be adjusted. He went on, this obviously wasn't the goal, and I have faith that the Florida Department of Education will correct this. Now, DeSantis's his campaign is hitting back. DeSantis' press secretary, Jeremy Redfern, actually hit back at Donald and said he shouldn't swing for the liberal media fences like Kamala Harris. Congressional Black Caucus Chairman Representative Stephen Horsford told reporters on Thursday that while he and Donald don't always see eye to eye on politics, his response to the guidelines should be acknowledged. He said, I saw Representative Donald's response. While I do not agree with a lot of his positions or his votes on this issue, calling out the governor and the Board of Education for standards that would in any way indicate slavery was a benefit should be condoned. Now, Donald is not a member of the CBC, of course. He has also backed President Donald Trump, which is a big part of this. We'll get into that later. Still, Whitley Yates, from Indiana, told The Hill that alienating Florida's only black GOP congressman was a mistake on the part of the DeSantis campaign. For the followers of DeSantis to go and attack the one person who is not only in alignment with your views but represents your state is distasteful. And I think what he's going to find and figure out is that that definitely is a negative strategy that will have further implications and a triple effect. Now, DeSantis and his team have generally taken a pugilistic attitude with the media and GOP rivals. When asked about Tim Scott's remarks, he said the senator was siding with liberals. Wow! Tim Scott siding with liberals. Wow. At the end of the day, you got to choose. Are you with Kamala Harris and the liberal media outlets, or are you going to side with the state of Florida? I think it's very clear that these guys did a good job on these standards. It wasn't anything that wasn't politically motivated. I think it's pretty obvious why Ron DeSantis' campaign is falling like a brick after this. He is really falling behind Donald Trump. Donald Trump's got more federal cases than Kodak Black and Lil Wayne put together. And he's beating DeSantis by like 50 points. He's killing this man. And we see now why. The Black Conservative Federation, one of the leading black conservative organizations in the country, in a statement warned that the new guidelines could make it harder for the GOP to build black conservative power ahead of 2024. Well, no blank, Sherlock. Oh man, let's just be real about this. Most of this controversy, most of these attacks, and don't get me wrong, I give credit where credit is due. I will give the black conservatives some credit. I wish liberals would push back against Joe Biden's racism often, but that's neither here nor there. Black MAGA Republicans are basically pushing back against Ron DeSantis. Now, these guys are supporters of Donald Trump. So I'm not going to pretend that they're pushing back at Ron DeSantis is solely about their desire to not alienate the black community. Because look, if they cared about alienating the black community, they wouldn't be Republicans, okay? Like, seriously, the Republicans are about as popular as chlamydia in the black community. That's just what it is. Like, gonorrhea is more popular than the Republicans in America. That's just, I'm sorry, that's just how it is. A lot of this is about them gaining favor with Donald Trump. Ron DeSantis is Donald Trump's biggest rival in the Republican Party. And so, even though I do agree with the brothers, let's not pretend that they are solely doing this out of some sort of allegiance to black people, or because they're motivated by a need to set the record straight about racism with against black people. Like I said, if that was the case, they probably wouldn't be Republicans. Ron DeSantis has completely botched this curriculum as well. He knew that after all the controversies we've talked about, you could go through the archives at my YouTube page where I talked to me and the Rev, one of the last shows me and the Rev did together. We talked about Florida, the Florida CRT fiasco, where DeSantis vetoed the CRT curriculum. We talked about that a few months ago, only about 2 or 3 months ago, I think it was. So you might want to look through that. Scott Cannon WLTH on YouTube. Check that out. But he knew that the standards of the education curriculum was going to be highly scrutinized. And so for him to try to put a silver lining in slavery, and it's not just slavery. There's also situations where they talk about race massacres, where white people lynch black people, and being like, well, let's talk about the violence that black people committed as well. And it's like, come on, dude. Come on, man. Come on, man. But let me just say this, and I talked about this when DeSantis vetoed the CRT curriculum, the critical race theory curriculum, 2 or 3 months ago. I said it. This is one part of the downside of liberals hijacking the civil rights movement, colonizing it, as I like to say it, colonizing things like critical race theory, forcing things like queer theory into CRT. What the hell does that have to do with critical race theory? What does that have to do with racism at all, or black history? Nothing. But when you have liberals, black and white, who are determined to push a sexual agenda, even in everything, including the race, the type of white supremacist racism that we faced in this country, then that gives people like Ron DeSantis the cover to do stupid stuff like this. They should have never given Ron DeSantis the cover to do stuff like this. They should have made whatever their curriculum was as factual and straightforward as possible. It should have taught the history of the black community instead of forcing queer theory and prison abolition on people. Things that are solely about your personal beliefs, your personal values. You can hold those. I'm not going to fault you for it, but that has nothing to do with educating children. Especially not on the institutional class warfare against the black community for the last 400 years we've been in this country. So again, it's important that we don't give right-wingers like Ron DeSantis cover to do what he's doing by essentially trying to force our own personal sexual agendas and all these other things into things like black history and African American studies. You teach slavery, you teach Jim Crow, you teach Tulsa and Rosewood and Wilmington and Atlanta and Springfield and the Red Summer of 1919. You teach Martin Luther King and Ella Baker and Fannie Lou Hamer and Malcolm X. You teach the history. You teach what happened. You don't push your cultural agenda, sexual agendas down people's throats. So then Ron DeSantis can easily say, hey, see, I had to veto it. I had to get rid of this because it had like queer theory in it. Like, you're like, what? But again, that is the price that we pay for letting liberals colonize the civil rights movement and push their agendas and their things they put their peanut butter in our chocolate. And so now sometimes all of it gets thrown out. Also, it's important to understand that even from a sheerly factual perspective, this isn't just about Ron DeSantis being insensitive. He's just blatantly wrong. There is nothing that black people learned how to do during slavery that black people weren't already doing. Black people had skills before slavery. Timbuktu in Mali was the Paris of the Middle Ages. Scholars from all over Europe used to come to study in Timbuktu. Mansa Musa was the richest human being who ever lived, just 100 years before slavery started in West Africa. He was so rich he bankrupted economies, whole economies everywhere he went, just by handing gold to people. Africans had skills in medicine, in mathematics, astronomy. They were hunter-gatherers, they were herders, they were farmers, they were survivalists, gold miners. Hold on, caller. They were sculptors. They had trade routes. They had centers for advanced learning, like I said, in Timbuktu. These places were cultural centers. They had skills in midwifery. Farming. That's what we brought in to do. How do you think Europeans learned how to grow rice? How are Europeans going to teach Africans how to grow rice? Have you ever had jollof? Blacksmithing. African blacksmiths were crafting tools and musical instruments and weapons and symbols of power out of raw materials for like hundreds, thousands of years by this point. Think about the Basari tribe. They have a long-standing tradition of metallurgy that even Europeans documented going back hundreds and hundreds of years. If anything, we taught them stuff. We taught them how to grow rice. We taught them farming and cultivation techniques because obviously when you're in a place as hot as Africa, you have to learn how to farm. You have to be smart about farming. You had a slave in Boston named Onesimus, who actually introduced Cotton Mather, the father of vaccines, to the principle and procedure of inoculations, because slaves, before doctors had started inoculating each other, were inoculating themselves and their children. Slaves! How did they learn that? Ron DeSantis? How'd they learn that, Ron DeSantis? You think they learned that from, post-slave academy? I seriously doubt it. These people were doing that in Africa. So Cotton Mathers learns from this black slave, and if you don't believe me, you can look it up, because he was named one of the 100 greatest Bostonians, because this was in Boston. That slave was actually named one of the greatest Bostonians of all time. This black slave taught the world about vaccinations. And Cotton Mather got all the credit. Now, while I commend, like I said, I commend these black conservatives for pushing back against Ron DeSantis, as I always say, I wish liberals would do the same thing against Jim Crow Joe Biden, okay, for his mass incarceration, for writing the Patriot Act, for being overall patronizing the black people, to talking to black leaders. We had the phone call where he was talking to black leaders like dogs, and telling us that we need to get in line behind Hispanics, in spite of the fact that black people loyally vote 90 to 95% for Democrats in every single election. Y'all need to do the same thing to Jim Crow Joe, all you Democrats out there. At least now I know, at least on some level, Republicans will push back. Black Republicans will push back against Ron DeSantis. Y'all need to do the same thing to Jim Crow Joe and Cop Mala and those people. You know, especially when it comes to things like reparations, where Joe Biden attributed the wealth gap to black kids not hearing enough records at home, not hearing enough words. He said, play some records for your kids. We'll have social workers who will come by and teach black parents how to raise their kids. That's just as offensive to me. If you can look at the 400-year wealth gap between whites and blacks and rationalize it based on black kids needing to hear more words at home and parents need to play records for their kids as a way to deflect from reparations, then we have a problem. And you are not getting my vote, buddy. Oh, let me take this caller. Hello, caller.
Hello, excuse me. Hello, Scott. How you doing?
Hey, how's it going, sister?
I'm doing well. You know what? I agree with a whole lot of things that you were talking about with Africa, because you know what? I really believe that the cradle of civilization came out of Africa.
It did.
And I used to think when I was younger, I used to think that Timbuktu was a fantasy place because it didn't seem real.
Yeah,
but it was real, a real place. A really real place. And I think about the education that those people had.
Yep.
And when they came here, when many of the slaves were brought here, they did not come here like ignorant folks.
Nope.
Those folks knew how to do stuff. They
yes,
knew
they
how
did.
to farm. So I don't understand what Mr. DeSantis is, and I'm really prefacing that, Mr. DeSantis, thinking that slavery somehow or another helped black folks.
Yeah, he's tripping.
Way too much. But anyway, I wanted to mention this too. Two things. We were mentioning about the civil rights in 1968.
Yes,
right?
yes.
I think, and I don't understand, why is it when black people try to move ahead, you get all these other sub people who benefit from our thing. Like it was I want to say white women benefited more from the
affirmative action.
Absolutely.
Yes, they did.
And they don't believe. People don't believe that. They think it was all for black folks.
They do.
And that really is not true.
Yeah, they blame us for it.
Yeah. They think they were hurting us, but they're hurting them because they're the ones that benefit. And then with the civil rights movement, then they want to stick the alpha. You know what I'm trying to say.
The Looga Booga took us.
Yeah. All of them is a part now of that, and you will almost get fired from your job to mention that.
Yes, you will.
I mean, it's just craziness, but that's a fix to our to black people.
Yep.
And see, and that's why if you go in and you try to see, that's what makes it difficult. When you want to go in and condemn a thing, then you got all these other sub people agendas, but you don't see that affixed to the Jewish Holocaust.
Nope.
That's not affixed to that.
Nope.
That wasn't affixed to when the Japanese were put into concentration camps.
Nope.
We were not put into. They were not. The other ones are not put into that. But anything that has to do with black folks, I don't get it.
Yep.
Well, I guess I do get it. And I know where I live.
Thank you for your call, sister.
Yeah. All right. Take care, Scott. Oh, Scott.
Yes.
One thing. You were mentioning a while back ago. Now you keep talking about the election.
Yes.
Now we were talking about. You read all of that stuff about what's his name? Did you say you was going to vote for?
Oh, Cornell, brother.
Yeah, Cornell. Yeah. Well, I'm saying I don't hear anything about him anywhere, and
nope.
I want you to read all of that stuff that you read before, because I did hear it. It's a long list of stuff that he was for, and on his agenda. If you still got that, I would like to hear that again tonight. Maybe some of the other people who did not hear it could hear it tonight.
Well, yeah.
After you do your happy
hand. Oh, yeah. It's all good. Thank you for your call. Yeah, like I said, I definitely, I support Brother Cornell. I've always said that. In virtually everything he does, because he's never been afraid to hold anybody accountable for what whatever they do to harm the poor, the working classes, etc. That's Democrats, that's Republicans, that's whoever. You know, for many years he got a lot of crap because he was critical of Barack Obama. But again, as somebody who is against the military-industrial complex, he has no choice. He has no choice but to be against the military-industrial complex. Before I have to go to a break, I'll just go through a quick read over a lot of the policies that I support from Brother Cornell. He is for dismantling the American empire, the military-industrial complex. We have over 800 military bases around the world, and we have to cut back on military expenditures, including NATO and AUKUS, dismantling that network of all those bases, Medicare for all, humane mental health care as well, decriminalization of drugs, creating a humane rehabilitation site, housing for all, quality education for all, college tuition and jobs for all, and living wages, abolishing poverty and homelessness. As I talked about on here, it would only cost $20 billion to permanently end homelessness in the United States, and we've sent $200 billion to Ukraine since February of 2022. Think about that. Think about if we put that money that we send to Ukraine in a proxy war, because we did instigate and provoke this proxy war with Russia with decades of our foreign policy. We could have gotten a lot accomplished. You know, he wants to target the legacy of white supremacy by ending mass incarceration, which I always talk about. Why don't we ever go to Joe Biden with this? You helped build mass incarceration. Undo it, Joe. Demilitarizing the police, abolishing cop cities, and promoting reparations, which is what's important of all. We're going to talk about reparations some more on this show. But first, I got to get to my first commercial break. Please stay with me here on WLTH 1370 AM. I'm Scott Cannon. This is my country.